Today I'm going to be working on an RPG system, or a role-playing game system, that is based on what you would see in the 90s. I've already set up some features and it's going to be using Node.js, and it's going to interact with a web page. So we're going to build both the web page and the Node.js server side. I'm using Node.js because you can use it on Mac and you can use it on Windows. So I'm going to talk you through some of the things I've already set up. So API documentation is basically just documentation saying how to use some of the systems that I'm going to be walking through. As you can see, nothing complicated. So when you set up Node.js, you usually use a command line to run the system, and you probably put this in the terminal just so you can run the main.js file. But because I want to automate it, because I'm going to be using it a lot to test things, I'll put it in a batch file using the cmd command /k, and that will run it just by clicking on the actual file itself. As you can see, it just runs. I'm going to talk you through the main.js. So I'm using Notepad++ just to write all my code. We start off with some of the basics. So HTTP is the basic utility from Node.js as well as FS. So HTTP allows you to write and access web-based stuff. FS is the file system, and utility is, I guess it's just random utilities. I can't remember what this is for. I think it's got something to do with parsing the request and response system from the web pages. Not that I don't think I use it in this particular document though. So this is incorporating a system that I designed. So server config is just hold your server data. So if you ever need to update your server information, you can just update it in one place, and you don't have to go through rifling through all the code just to find out where, if you decide to change your server IP or your server port. The messaging, this is how I'm going to handle my post and get requests from the web browser, as well as requests for web pages. I'm using messaging but just because it's something I've built and it's pretty simple. I don't really want to use, where was I? Messaging. So messaging will handle the request for the web pages, and as well as returning stuff. If there's no web page found that you can request, or it's forbidden for you to access, it will return a forbidden page or a did not find page, and it will also return the pages that you can access as well. And it will handle some of the events for your post requests and stuff like that. So if you're communicating from the web page to your Node server, it will allow you to do certain functionality from your Node server that you couldn't do on the web page. For instance, save and load files directly instead of having to go through a save into downloads window and all the stuff like that. It can just directly access an area of your hard drive and just save straight to it. And obviously this is local to your computer, so it doesn't access online unless you tell it to. Obviously that's a bit trickier to do that, because you would have to set up a domain or use some sort of networking tunnel just to access from somebody else's drive. File operations. Now, you can just use FS, but I have changed it to file operations just because I've sent some stuff to my friend who runs it on a Mac computer, and if I use FS, sometimes the stuff I put in doesn't work on his computer, whereas it works on my computer. So I've essentially built up this framework that you can just throw it in. I can just send it straight to him and it will work straight away without any fiddling about. So at least I don't remember any, or if it was fiddling about, it's just changing a boolean or something like that to Mac. File operator, I'll talk you through what this does. So calculate root directory. So this stops it from accessing anything higher than the directionally we have the file in. So right now this is in the S4C external repository projects RPG system folder. Now it stops anybody from sending a request to access anything higher than this. So if I use the file op, you can't access any data above this, and also it helps with Mac. It helps with the Mac side of it as well. So you don't have to put anything in. You just say, where's the root directory of this file? You just put in the file name, and you should be good to go. Messaging.setHome. Obviously the main is just the file that you're using. Set.home. So when you just get like a slash on a web page, instead of having to put slash index.html, it will just automatically load the index.html web page instead, which is a bit more convenient for most people. And the main function is just something that's we're going to set up, and we're going to edit this one to handle different requests that we send from the web page itself. Because the web page is going to hold the game and probably build an editor as well for the game. The requests will be sent to this. For instance, on this one, we got the on web page requested. So when the web page requests web page, so it could be anything from an image to video to just a web page document, a web page file. It's just going to read the file from the client folder, which is where we're going to store the game files. And we're just going to add the URL, which is it's obviously a relative URL, so it would be just the client.index. It's all it's going to do. So, and obviously, if the file does not exist, we're going to turn 404 not found, which is just going to say that the file doesn't exist and it doesn't work, so it doesn't crash. Essentially, this is just a basic test, which we'll see when we look at the actual web page. So when you click this, it would run the test, but we'll see how that's set up later on. This is just establishing a connection with your server IP and your port. You're just making it listen on that port, essentially, and when it gets a request, it just runs this process, which I'm going to show you what this does. Console. This just tells you in the console itself how to access your server. So obviously it says hosting on, which is what it says down here, hosting on HTTPS. Local host, because that's the IP, the local host of the IP, and the port is the 3000. This signifies the color, and this just resets the color so nothing else prints in that color. There's different colors you can add in, but it's not going to really be helpful. The main uses the node, so all these things up here, we notice that it goes into node utilities, which is node utilities / server config. So this is just what the server config contains. The IP, the port, messaging, this is the complicated one. It's going to do a lot of different things, so you can add events to, it just adds events. So you got your ping, so when you get a ping it just returns whatever you pinged back. That's easy to explain when you do the other side of when you actually look at what there's another file that we need to look at on the web page on the client side. That'll explain that a bit more, but it's essentially sending, every time you ping the server it will send a message back with a ping in, which you can then calculate the time it's taken to actually ping. Your IDs, your events, posts, get, so these are your different types of post systems, so you can use, these all basically do the same on my system, but you can use it to denote different types of action. That can be very useful for you. So redirect pages, so if you've got a page that you want to redirect to, you can actually set it up as a page will show and it will automatically redirect you to a new page. Pipeline, that's for downloading stuff, which I don't think we can actually go straight into, because that's like downloading zip files and things like that. Export filters. Yeah, so not found. Oh yeah, that's just a container. So not found, authorized. So you can tell things to, if you request a certain web page, you can tell it to automatically say this is not found, this is forbidden, this is unauthorized, etc. On web page requested and defined for every get. You can essentially force it to do things when you request a web page, or whether a web page is not found, essentially. So it doesn't know whether it's not found, whether it's found, forbidden. You can just tell it to do anything else. Your pages, this is page not found, so you can just put in here, or you can even stream from a file operation and overwrite it and say that when a file's not found, we're going to display this message, or file's not found or unauthorized, we're going to show this message. Set home, already covered, so when it's a slash, we just replace with the home. But if there's nothing set, we're just going to set it straight to slash, because that's what it's going to be looking for anyway. So export, add event, post. This is going to be your event essentially. So every time you add an event to it, it's going to, every time you send a post request from your server, it's going to look it up into a table, and then it's going to do the relevant callback to whatever you've given your event name. So send event name from your client side, it's going to look it up and it's going to send it back. As long as you've got all this set up, you can essentially just use the front end of it rather than all the stuff I'm explaining now. So the page pipeline, type of request, you can either get a get or a post. When you do a get, you're generally talking about a web page, and when you do a post, you're normally talking about accessing information or things like that. When doing the get, when doing all the, we set the request URL to the file name that we're trying to access. We're doing the parameters, So these will be like the different parameters that you put in your URL. So it'd be like the question mark, something equals something, and we're going to split it all up, and we're going to store all the parameters in there in an array, so we can access it access it here rather than accessing it in. We'll be able to see all the information basically in no particular order, so you could put it in any order you want. File name, I'm just taking out percentage 20s, which is like the spacebar equivalent for a URL. So yeah, when it's slash, we're just going to change the file name to the home address, which would be like index.html instead of putting the slash in. Status code, so status code, that's going to be the same as on the client side. The MIME type, export MIME type, which is slightly a bit further down here. It's just going to determine, based on your file extension, what type of file that it's got to interpret it as. So when you've got HTML, it's going to do a text/HTML file. And if it's an image, we'll do an image/ whatever your image type is, kind of thing. And we'll just do plain if it's just a normal text file. On meme type, on requested, essentially looking at, you can create a funnel to see what we're actually looking at rather than on web page requested. So any web page that is requested, we can do something immediately, and then it would just exit. We don't have to worry about anything else. So because when doing that, we won't actually have to worry about any of this. It's like the checking if the URL is essentially forbidden to access. We don't really want to. We're not really using forbiddens or unauthorized or event redirectories and pipes and the defaults. We're not really using these at all. What page I'm deciding that? Of course, if you on the last one you do 404 not found. Really, I probably should have done. Not found for not found files. Process post exports. When you requested a post request, so your request method is post, I'm just going to do all this. When you send data to your server, we're going to actually compile all that data together from chunks into a string. And the string's called body. So on the event we receive data, we're just going to keep adding to the body until we've got all the data, and when all the data is requested, the request end will be invoked, and then all this will actually be taken into account. So it's going to decompile all the string text that I'm going to send. So if you've sent a whole body, it's going to be compiled into JSON, stringified through JSON, and then it's going to be sent back. It's going to be sent over to your server, then it's going to be stored in your body, and then we're just going to convert it back to an object so we don't lose any data. Because you can't really send objects from a web browser to your server straight away as an object format. We have to convert it to string, then back to an object. You could also like add, if you wanted to, you could also add like encryption here. So then you can encrypt it on your web page and then decrypt it on the server at this point. In different types of methods. So the only way I can really describe this is to go into the client side. So this is all your client stuff. So this would be on your client server call. So you server get requests. So when you send data, it's going to go through all this, which is going to go into object data, which is going to have your mode, your method, and your object data. So when you, let's say you set a post, it's going to set your post, which is your third parameter, which would be your method, as post. So when your object method is post, I'm going to do all this. And it goes through the same for put, get, delete, for different things. So although all these do pretty much the same thing, it just stores all the events slightly differently. So call IP address. So as I was saying, it stringifies the object data, stores it. We open up a connection between the server and the web browser. So this is on the web browser now. And we set the header type of the data transfer, which is going to be just plain text. We're going to look at the state changed, and when it's state changed, basically it means it's received a message back. So we look at what the message back is, and then we just, okay, so maybe I'll give through it in order instead. So object, we've sent the data across to here. It's got decompiled, compiled together, object, method, post, export on post. You can probably tell that I'm doing this on the cuff, not actually thinking deeply and structuring it all out to make it easy to understand. I'm just trying to get all the information in. Export on post, object mode dot message. Forget what this does exactly, but I know this goes through all the different events for the post. And if the post names, the event name is the same as the object mode, the mode that you've sent it over as, so your method, so that's your callback, like your post, you get, you put, you delete. If that's registered for your mode is your tag, so you can give it an identifier to run a specific event on your server. And if the event name is the same as your server event name, it will run through that event using that data that you've sent over. So this is just going to run whatever you call on your main. This had a tag of test. We're just returning a message we want to send back. Then we write a head, which is just going to be plain, so we can write it back. So we can send this back to the server, to the web page. Then we can just keep going. If result is nothing, we can just send results. And if there is nothing in the result, we just send nothing and return. And we just continue on. It just cancels everything out and just goes back to everything. But if it does send data back over, it will go to this onReady state change and it will be interpreted, and if it is nothing, we don't do anything, and if it is something, we go for a callback, which we're going to set up so it catches any information that we brought back, and we're going to send that callback with this parameter of the object that you've sent from this place here, your web server. Make them go. We do the same thing for get, we do the same thing for delete, we do the same thing for put, we do the same thing for, we do something slightly different for ping. Because we're just going to do a single ping event that we don't need to do all this crazy stuff, event calls and stuff like that. And we're just going to do pretty much the same thing, except we're just going to write it instantly, the result instantly. And we just return it. And has not been assigned the object mode. So essentially, if you make a mistake and don't put in the object mode or the method, or one of them is wrong, it will actually tell you on your console which one is what's happened. And get memory type. So this is the process which is called from your main processing system in your message in your main. We send it over the request data and the response data. It's on process web page, so it's doing all the things that we just talked about, and that last one is just handling all the data response stuff that we just talked about as well. So if T does actually have some sort of web page request, we can actually send it over data, and if it's not, we just don't bother doing anything. Last thing we need to do is, so last things, file operator. File operator is pretty simple, read, stream, just uses the FS data stuff, so yeah, it's just going to send data back in whatever format you want it in, essentially. This has all been documented in the documentation section. I don't know which ones I'm going to be using. Probably just some of them require each other though. Probably just the read and write. It's normally, or directory delete is a bit much, I think. Directory copy, directory move, file write is probably the main stuff. File append maybe. File read buffer, that's the one that's going to handle web pages and stuff. File read, it's just going to be generic reading of file lines and file read lines. File delete, file rename, file copy, file move, file exists. Calculate root directory, which is, can't remember exactly what this does. Or maybe we use it on the main somewhere. Oh, calculate root directory, yeah. So we can just, must be setting something up there in here, maybe. Okay, so yeah. This is how it determines whether it's Mac or Windows, just by using this function. Slash or yeah. Is there a way to see what node version I'm running? No. Right. The internet says it's npm version. So node 10.16.3. So that's the version I'm running right now. So server call. So we've got the IP address is going to be stored here. That's the what we're opening the thing on, the server on. I'm going to get the get, the post, and the put and delete, and we're going to automatically set these up to these values for these. So the event name and the message. the data you send versus the name of the event, so what the server is going to receive, callback, and the error. It's pretty straightforward. I'm just got a basic HTML template, so tab name, I haven't said anything yet, so it should be VG game. Server call needs to be called from the script, so you put the slash script at the end with the source pointing to the server call. And we don't have any star yet, and we've got post message, and we've got the server.post. This is just to test it, so when this function is called when we click this button, and it should send a message, so hello from client, and when it's received it should send a message back, hello from server. So we're going to print out what the client says, and we're going to print out what the server says on the client. So we run this now. Localhost. So you just type this into your browser. So it says here, but you can, if you're on Windows, you can do shortcut, paste it in here, and then save it, and you will be able to run it like this. So now if I click check post, so nothing in the system, click it. So message from server says hello from server, as we expected, and hello from client, as expected. Right. You will need to refresh the server, the bat file, every time you make an amendment to the actual server code. Right, so I'm going to start editing this. I'll just leave the button in for now. But we're going to be using a canvas. I think you need to have both tags in. I don't think you can use the space slash at the end. Set it up with an ID, and we're going to put base layer, and we need it to be one word, so I'm going to leave this one word. On load, the script accesses anything that's already written. It needs to come after anything that's been set. So if I wanted to access this canvas by the ID, as soon as the window opens, I would need to write the script here. If I wrote it up here, it would not function. It just won't function unless you use window load, because I'm using native JS rather than different APIs. So jQuery, you probably put something like that. I'm doing the same thing. Before I do anything else, I want to add in this as a function. I'm going to put tag data. I'll just put, I can pick a name, and what this is going to return is document query selector, and it's going to return identifier. Put return here and return here. So I'm just going to put an S on the end of that. What this one's going to do is going to get all. So this one returns everything with that identifier, and this one returns the first instance of that identifier. This is sort of a bit like jQuery, but I'm just programming it in just to make life a bit easier. And I know to make sure this canvas needs to have a width, because it's 680 by width of, that's 640 I think. I think it's 640 and 480. Could be 620, but I think it's 640. And this is the resolution size. It's not the thing at all. Now, just because resolution size doesn't mean that it's going to appear as just a 40-80 pixel thing on the screen. It's just going to be, you can scale that up so it fills the entire screen, or you can leave it as just a little window on the screen. But to make sure I can see it, I'm going to put canvas. So it's just this tag here. If it was the ID, you'd put hashtag base layer and do that, and it would just use that ID. But we're not using the ID, we're using the tag. So my put width is, I'm just going to leave it as 640 pixels, and height is 480 pixels, and I'm just going to leave it that way for now. And just make sure we know it's there. I'm going to put it in as a solid 1 pixel. So solid means just one solid line rather than a dashed or anything else. And I'm going to use the 000, which denotes black. So I'll use hex values for colours. You can also use it 6-digit hex codes, which that's also black. And it's FFF. Yeah, for white. But because the background's automatically going to be white, we're not going to see it. So I'm going to run it again, and we're going to need to refresh the browser because we've updated something. And there you go. That's a canvas. 680 by 480. 640 by 480. And we haven't drawn anything to it, but I'm trying to think whether or not we should put it all the new scripts into a file, which I think I'm going to do. So instead of doing all this script here, I'm going to put script for I don't unload stuff, but it's technically the proper way to do it. Function, so unload. I want to use var, I want to use let. If I use let, since canvas, let canvas and let canvas go. Oh, you know what, let's make a class as function. So although it says function, this is actually a class because of what we're going to do next. And I'm just going to leave that open there now. So what it's going to do is we're just going to pass it a put this dot canvas element equals canvas element. So it's declaring like your instant variables. And want a context equals, at this point we can just use this dot get context to 2D. I'm not too familiar with canvases, but I'm pretty sure that's right. Just leave this canvas. So when we create a layer now, we can create a, I'm going to capitalize the L. So now I need to bring that canvas in. Actually put this below, because we're going to write a lot of scripts for this. So layer.js, and I at least want to draw to the canvas today. So let's layers, because we called it layer, not layers. So this will hold all the layers that we have. So if we have multiple canvases, we can put multiple instances in here. We can go layers.push, layers.push, and I'm going to put new layer, a new layer. No, do it in the onload. Do the first layer equal new layer, and we go first. Oh, layer does not take a null argument, so I'm going to have to grab this canvas. So I'm going to use the base ID. So when we use IDs, we use a hashtag or an octothorpe at the start to denote it's an ID, not a class or a tag. So put the first layer in, and I'm going to push it. So because I didn't update the, we haven't changed the server, we've just changed the client, so we can just refresh the page and it should do all the heavy lifting. So now we can have a look, see if we've got any errors. Get, just going to check. This is like debugging, so we can do right, so when I put P in, it will highlight it because it knows it exists. Get context. Okay, so that does work. Why did it not work either? Change, because I'm using an instant variable, I changed the name of it from canvas element, so I've got to change that back to canvas. Now I can restart it. Now if we have a look in the layers, we should have one layer and it should point straight to this canvas. Okay. Now there's different ways we can do loops, so we can get request animation frame, which it might be a bit too resource intensive, so I'm going to actually make a game loop, and it's going to equal function just a generic function, and we're just going to leave over this and over this and over this. So I'm actually going to make it very slow to begin with, just to say test. And I'm going to go set into 4. And it takes 2 parameters, it takes a function. And in that function, I'm just going to send game loop. Well, not send it, we're going to invoke it. And we're going to put it at 5 times. Anything you times by 1,000 is a second, so that's 5 times 1,000, so that's 1,000 is 1,000 milliseconds. So that's 5 seconds. So if we do that now, we should see that in the console. Interval test. It takes 5 seconds, isn't it? 3, 4, yeah. So the game loop will work, so we might turn it down to 1. 1 for now. Obviously we're going to put it to like 20 or something like that to get 50 frames or something like that in the end, but right now. Right. So how do we do this? So we do layers 0 because we'll have at least one layer at the moment. So I'm going to do draw. Let an increment now, so equals 0. Context. Which one? Context. Top. Y. Is it draw line? Zero. Now we'll just put in ink, comma ink, and every second we'll just add on. We will keep this ink, but we just want it for actually drawing it right. Draw line. So, where is it? Instead of looking at documentation, I'm just going to draw image. Right, so it's move to and stroke is what the internet is now. Move to and stroke. And now we can reset it, and now we should have something drawn to the screen. And it's very slow, but yeah. So now we've got to figure out what happens if we want to clear the layout. So maybe I should just look at this next time and get all my notes down. So instead of just doing it off the cuff, but that'll be all for today.